Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the LiftAffect podcast. I am your host, Matt McNeil, founder, clinical director, and director of human performance at LiftAffect, where we assist professional pilots with maintaining better mental health and optimizing their mental skills. The goal of this podcast is simple: to help pilots and other high liability professionals and disciplines come out of the shadows to discover how we can live better lives personally and professionally. Join us each episode as we discuss various topics ranging from mental health, mental skills and performance, to business, entrepreneurship, and a few other surprises along the way.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the LiftAffect podcast. I'm your host, Karl Keller, along with the ever-present Matt McNeil. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing. Yeah, people won't understand, but I guess I got in your head this morning.
Well, you're going to have to qualify that now.
Oh, God.
So yeah, I'm in a session with a client, and we're using a new platform for the podcast. We're testing out some new stuff, and I had sent Karl an invite to log in, and I'm in a session, and all of a sudden I hear Karl's voice coming through my headset, my AirPods. And the client I was with couldn't hear him, right? But I could hear him, and I'm hearing this sort of ethereal voice. Are you there? Are you there? And I'm like, what is there a haunting going on? It sounds like Karl. I realized he had logged in, and I had it was just so I like, I had to cancel.
I told Matt I would haunt him forever.
I know. I'm like, what the hell's going on? So that was kind of funny. But anyways, going good, man.
Halfway through another week.
Yeah, it was in Denver. It was 75 on Sunday. We went to Wash Park and hung out, throwing the Frisbee around. And then it snowed. It snowed yesterday, like got dumped on with snow, snowed a little bit last night. And then this weekend, it's supposed to be in the 80s. So
yeah, we had 83 yesterday, and I guess it's supposed to be 87 today. We didn't get one lick of snow this year. It was just, the kids were so depressed.
Really?
Oh yeah, it was horrible. There was no winter. I'm not looking forward to the summer. It didn't kill off the bugs and stuff. So
oh wow,
it's going to be a heck of a summer.
Yeah.
But hey, I see that the questions just keep rolling in. Got a couple actually 2 or 3 good ones depending on where we can go today. They may just take up the whole day again.
All right.
So let me hit you up with one. We'll get into it because I know you kind of can take it down the rabbit hole. The first one, I really liked the episode on peak performance and how to improve our practice. I'm wondering, what do you think about the fire hose mentality of our training system that we have at the airlines? Is it effective? Do you have tips for maximizing our learning in the face of too much information being presented in too little time?
It's a good question. Well, what do you think, Karl, of the fire hose mentality? I mean, is it effective? I think it is. I think it clearly it works.
It can be. I mean, I can tell you
tradition of that.
Yes, and over the years, I can tell you, at least at my airline, the time that they've taken to do the training has gotten more and more compressed and condensed. You can make some arguments both ways. I mean, I remember we had to know a lot more of systems. And there was a lot more in-depth information than it is now. And you're more of in many cases, a manager as far as, because the SOPs across the aircraft have finally truly become SOPs. So you learn the basics about the airplane and how to implement it within the system. In other words, in that domestic, international, and all that sort of stuff. But it can be a fire hose, especially when you start getting into the simulator phase, because there's so much that they have to get done. The FAA keeps adding other things, like the hand flying. They want you to do more hands-on. So that's something that's that was pushed not too long ago. So there's a lot. The FAA will continue to add things.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think it's evolved with, certainly as the technologies, become much better, much more comprehensive. You don't need to know the limitations necessarily, like, the inner workings of how the door opens, or the internal workings of a door. Like you may not need to know that, because you have indicators up front that will tell you exactly which part of the door is not working properly.
Yeah, matter of fact, maintenance knows before you do often because it sends a message.
Totally, they do.
Just to throw one other thing into training, I mean, obviously time is money. I think they said on average a transition course costs around $50,000. So there's a huge motivation for your employer to get you back out on the line,
for
to
sure,
start generating revenue. So they're going to compress it as much as they can.
Yeah, I think so let's get a little critical. The fire hose, just in terms of how people learn. So this, now we can apply this to the other listeners as well that may not be aviation specific. And I'll just say, like, I'm not a fan of the fire hose. And here's why. I think it's a crappy way to learn, and the data supports that. It's a crappy way to learn. We only have so much bandwidth, and there is a there was a famous study that was done to determine how many things can a person learn at one time. And the reality is we can learn somewhere between 5 and 7, 5 plus or minus 2 things at once. That's how much we can hold into our memory. And so it was called the Zeigarnik effect. And this was a Russian psychology researcher. They did a study where I think it was like they were noticing waiters. And waiters, one is they could only memorize so many things at once. That's why phone numbers are 7 numbers, and our radio frequencies are 5. They didn't make them. They could have a whole lot more frequencies if they increased the number, but they do it in 5 because we can't actually hold much better than 5 numbers at a time. We're not capable of multitasking. We know that, and there's all sorts of lots of science to support that. And we can get into that if you want. But what this study that they had done, Bluma Zeigarnik, I think her name was, and she had found that waiters. So there's some tricks to learning. One is there's only so many things you can hold in your memory, and interestingly, waiters that if you had paid them, they forgot faster than if you hadn't paid them. It's not interesting, right? So if you think about, like, how does this apply to you? Well, leaving some unfinished business is a great way to be able to start back up where you left off. I think Hemingway always said, he stopped writing mid-sentence because if he completed the sentence, it was much harder when he came back to it to restart where was his idea. So he would stop writing halfway mid-sentence, and then he could easily just join right back up with where he was. But that's kind of getting into some nerdnicky things. But I think I'm not a fan of the fire hose, because the reality is we cannot retain all that information. We shut down. And if you ever go to like a seminar or a speech, or somebody talking a 4-hour seminar, by the first break you're tapped out. You've already learned, you're done, and they need the coffee break, and people are out there talking about, God, can you believe we have three more hours of this? Oh, it's just too much. Same in the classroom, and so part of that is because it's called channel capacity. We only have so many resources we can allocate, and the reality is the best data shows about 3. And so when you think about like a to-do list, it shouldn't be more than 3 things, and 1 should be your most important. We can talk about that and a whole nother thing in terms of how to plan your schedule out. But I think that the fire hose, I understand why they do it. It's not a good thing, and so I think the question asked is what can you do about it, right? Is that reframe that?
I'm wondering what you think about the fire hose mentality that we have. Is it effective? And do you have tips for maximizing our learning in the face of too much information presented in too little time?
Tips. So the biggest, I don't like the word hack, strategy that you can use when you're getting a ton of information thrown at you is, and I would tell this to flight students all the time, and even at the airlines we talk, it's like, you're not going to learn everything in the ground school. You're not going to learn everything about systems. You're not going to learn everything about the FOM. You're not going to learn everything about your ops manual. Like, you're going to learn that out online when you're actually applying it. And so constant studying, even if you study 15 minutes a day, is a good way to learn over time. So don't expect to walk out of there with full comprehensive knowledge about everything inside a month or 8 weeks. It's just not going to happen. So set your expectations to be something that's realistic. Choose wisely what you're going to learn, because what we tend to do is we just put a big laundry list of everything together, of all the things that we want to learn or we want to get done, and we just get overwhelmed. We don't really learn any of them. So you really should choose what's most important. And, because when you're saturated, we become paralyzed. And I see this in training all the time. People just get completely overwhelmed with the amount of information, and it's paralyzing. And then you become self-doubt, and then our actions become slower. So overloading people with information, you're just causing them to overcommit with what they're going to know, how they're going to approach it. And so forget flying. If you're working for an organization, two of the crucial skills you probably aren't learning is how do you prioritize the information that's being poured into you, and then how do you understand the point of equilibrium when it becomes actionable. So a quick way to work on this is I use something right here, Productivity Planner. You and I, Karl, we've talked about this many times. I love this thing because what it says is each day, it says most important task of the day. That's number 1. And then it says secondary tasks of importance, 2 and 3. And then there's additional tasks, 4 and 5. 5, that's it. There's only 5. Now I keep a laundry list of everything. It's like on the whiteboard, just every single task that you got to do, throw it up there. And then I pull what is the most important task that I need. And it's 1. It's not 5. It's not 7. It's not 3. It's 1. What is the most important task? And then really the secondary tasks. I can probably get those done, but any more than that, and I'm not going to get done. And secondly is do not become distracted with other tasks as they come in. Most important task means that is what I'm going to do above all other tasks. So if you think about, if you're learning a new airplane, or you're learning something in your medical practice, a new procedure, or you're learning something as a litigator, you're trying to study a trial or trying to work on a part of your argument, it's important to figure out what is the first thing that's most important for tomorrow. For today. I always plan today the prior day before. We'll talk about that in a second. So, but choose the most important piece for where you are for that day, for that section of where you're at. Then choose a second, and do not veer from that. You don't work on the second or third or fifth or sixth distraction until you've completed the first one. If you do that, that will put you in the top 5%. And if you do it consistently, you'll see the fruits of that. It will geometrically multiply if you do that. Karl, what's your thoughts on that?
I agree with all those things. One of the other things that I used to do, and it kind of crosses a whole bunch of things, both aviation and non-aviation, is I look at things and I call it the rule of 3. It's like when you meet somebody, to remember their name, you say it 3 times. It's kind of reinforcement. If I have a problem reading something, I'll go back and I'll reread it a little bit slower, and then go back and read it again. And it seems like by the 3rd time I start to get it, and I look at the most important things, because there's a lot of stuff that's peripheral and it doesn't carry the same weight and the same emphasis. And I think that reinforces an issue. So if you're talking to somebody and it's important, emphasize it 3 times, and you'll be surprised how often the person will pick it up and remember it, because it's reinforced in their mind. That's a personal opinion.
Yeah.
But it seems it works when you do it to just do it once, and it's not enough. You'll lose it most of the time.
we can only remember, again, we can only remember one thing at a time, really, basically. But I think that's where people fail, is they don't know how to choose. Another thing is focusing on one thing. It promotes action. You learn to do less but more often. I would say do a little a lot, don't do a lot a little. And what's Newton's first law, right? An object in motion tends to stay in motion. An object at rest tends to stay at rest. And so if you can just get the one piece that creates some movement, you actually then start to get some momentum. So I think that's probably just a quick answer to that question, but it's a good question. And the data shows that the fire hose thing is empirically a very bad idea. It's not a good way to try to learn something.
You talked about emphasizing it later on, but you brought it up a couple of times, so I'll kind of circle back around and hit it. And that is multitasking. People seem to think that they can do multiple things at once, but very often, especially when it's something that a difficult concept, focus on that, because if you're trying to do multiple things, sometimes that is enough to distract you where you're not learning everything you need to learn. Our focus needs to be on what it is that you're trying to grasp.
Yep. Absolutely. We can learn to switch tasks quickly, but trying to do multiple things at once, we really can't juggle more than three things, and it's effectively, you're best at juggling one thing. Our muscle memory can do lots of things at one time. That's how you can walk and chew gum. You're not thinking about that. But in terms of our cognitive load, our channel capacity, it's very, very limited. And when you think everything is important, nothing is important. And so if you're learning a new system, or you're learning a new procedure, or you're learning whatever it is you do, figure out what's the one thing that is going to be the catapult to the rest of your learning, and start with that piece, which gets us a little bit back into our discussion of deliberate practice last time, which is you've got to break things down into steps instead of trying to look at it all at once. That's how you can learn. And you can reduce the amount of time that you can spend learning. And I think the airlines, in some respects, they've been able to, they do a poor job of deliberate practice, but they sort of do it, I think, unbeknownst to them. The way our systems are blocked out and the way we kind of build that out is like, piece by piece, start with what's, the basics, learn to walk before you can run. But they could do a much better job. And if they actually really did, they would decrease the amount of training time than what they have now, which is the name of the game.
I agree. Hey, go to another one. This one's a loaded one. So you could probably spend a lot of time on this one. Matt, what do you think about the near misses that seem to be happening with greater frequency? What role do you believe psychological performance and well-being has in these events?
Well, one is I have no idea. I mean, we don't know until the reports come out about what happened. Why did these things happen? I think there is a trend that seems to be developing. We're seeing more and more of this. And I think there's multiple causal factors. It's not a single bullet as to why this is happening, but it's a problem. And so what is the role of psychology? A role of psychology is in everything. I mean, so in human factors, which is what we're talking about, there's three spheres. There is the human factor, there is the machine factor, and there is the environment factor, the environmental factors. And the way the intersectionality of that is where human factor psychology is. So anytime you put a human within the loop of a machine and within an environment, there is a human factor that's going to be at play. And what rules our behavior? What's our engine? Our brain. It's our psychology. And so no doubt there's going to be if there was a human involved, the human piece is going to be a factor. And we know classically, historically, that aviation accidents are related to human problems most of the time, not machine and environment. I mean, it's the way the errors in the human piece that have led to a pretty bloodied history, which is why we've improved the machines and even improved environmental factors to compensate for human error. So perfect example would be autopilots. We use them. In fact, we're required to use them in certain situations, and that has undoubtedly led to safer outcomes than trying to have a human being. Algorithms that are programmed into machines will be more consistent than the algorithms that are performed in human beings. Now, human beings will always be better than machines in some respects. Humans can care, machines can't. Humans can have some of that judgment that machines don't have, but in terms of the mechanics of it, the autopilot is going to fly much better than the human will. And guys try to argue that all the time, but the data does not support that. So it's a factor. What is the role of it? I have no idea. You have to wait for the report to be released on some of these near misses to find out what was the problem. So why is it happening more? I think that there's an experience issue that we are seeing. I think there's way more flying there's more demand than the industry honestly has the capacity to be able to fulfill. I think that there's problems with the ATC system. It's a complicated environment, and there is this let's jam everybody through as passengers and as pilots and flight attendants and mechanics, and there's just a huge need. There's a huge amount of retirements that are happening. They're hiring at unprecedented levels. They've never seen this kind of hiring before, and the experience level is less and less experienced. And so those things are going to they're gonna bite us in the butt. And I think we're seeing the warning signs of this. And my worry is that there's something bad is going to happen very soon if we don't figure this out.
I agree. The biggest change, or that's compared to the past, is I think the experience level. There's so many more people coming through that are newer and younger, and it's not just flying. You look at I know that on ground support, some of these things have been caused by people that were not flyers. They were just, one of them was, I believe, an ambulance crossing a runway as an example. I just think that it's harder to get people the level of experience and is gone down quite a bit across the board, because everything else is pretty much the same. The ATC is as it always was, or slightly better, because now they have certain things, especially at airports, that are able to notify them when things happen. So I think that's the biggest variable that's changed, but that's just a personal opinion, like you say.
We've got to wait for the conclusions to come out. And look, the NTSB and the FAA does a very good job at investigating. Yep. And if you've ever read one of these reports or worked on some of these investigations, it is as thorough as, if hospitals could do that with death, patients would not die at nearly the rates that they do. And there are hospitals that are learning, and, I've worked with organizations to teach them how we do it in aviation, to help them implement that into how they do it in healthcare. And aviation is kind of the model on how to approach some of these human errors, but it's a very complicated environment, and there's a lot of things happening, and there's a lot of factors that are going into it. But let's just wait and see. I've gotten lots of questions about, some of these, loss of control, nearly hitting the water stuff, and I'm just like, you can speculate all day, but until you actually get the report of what happened, and they will figure out exactly what happened. It's just all conjecture. It doesn't mean anything. So my opinion doesn't matter. Karl's opinion doesn't matter. It matters what the report says.
Yep.
And then we'll hopefully learn from that and be able to figure out ways of taking steps to mitigate some of those errors. But the human side, psychology plays a role in everything, as long as there is a human involved. And even if a human built the thing, or is programming the thing, or is maintaining the thing, psychology and mental performance are a huge factor in all of this.
I agree. Well, you didn't go down as deep a rabbit hole as I thought, although you did bring
Keeping it
hospitals
brief today, man.
Yeah, I tell you, but you did bring hospitals into it. So
Okay.
here's another one.
I mean, I can go deeper if you want, but I don't think it's necessary. If
I got
people
another
want
one
more,
here.
if you want know more, just send a question in, and we can explore it more. There's a lot. I mean, I could pull lots of research and a lot of different references that might be helpful.
I can tell you, I've thrown things at Matt just on the fly, and I swear to God, there's like an encyclopedia inside of him that he pulls stuff out, and it's like almost like he's reading it verbatim. And I go, "How the heck did you do that?" It's just truly amazing sometimes. I'm lucky to remember my own name half the time. So,
well, it's just it's dorky stuff, but I just find it endlessly fascinating.
And obviously, so do our listeners.
Yep.
So I got another one. This one is off totally in a different direction, and it's something that we've hinted at, and I think we've actually had a question that we brought up previously that was kind of in this realm. It says, you guys have promised to talk about entrepreneurship and business. I know Matt does a lot of business coaching in your business, the MCM Business Solutions. Many of our professional community are also small business owners as well as pilots. And he says, can't wait to see where you take this one. So I'm just lobbing you a softball.
Just talk about business, I guess.
Well, it's part of it. I mean, how many times have you sat in a cockpit and the guy next to you goes, I don't care what it was. It was the latest thing, whether it was hey, I've got this coffee deal. I've got this, the side hustle. Hey, I've got this investing. I do this, I got a side business doing X. There's always somebody or doing something. And it just invariably gets brought up while you're sitting cruising at 350.
Yeah, drinking your coffee.
Yep.
So, well, gosh, that's a really open.
It is, and that's why I'm just throwing it at you and see where you go. I'm just curious.
So, okay, let me think. Where do I want to take this? Well, one is most of the businesses I coach are not pilot-owned businesses, because I don't do a lot of coaching with realtors. Sorry, had to make the joke. If I was paid a dime for every pilot that's a realtor, I'd be a rich guy. And maybe that's because pilots, real estate allows them to be able, to work with their schedule, and you can go get a real estate license fairly quickly. It doesn't mean you're a good realtor. But there's so many pilots that are realtors. Have you noticed that? A lot of them own property.
That's what you see. A lot of people are.
Yeah.
They own a lot of rental property. That's what I see and hear a lot of guys do.
Yeah, it starts with rental properties, and then sometimes they're like, "Well, heck, I'll just go get my real estate license because it will probably be cheaper, for me to just broker my own deals and pay a real estate agent an exorbitant fee." And so that kind of makes sense. But I don't work. A lot of the businesses I work with as a coach are not pilot owned. They have been, but typically not. But let's talk about, oh man, there's so many things we could do. Okay, what are some fundamental ways of improving a business? If you're going to start a business, let's do that. Start a business. You want to start a business, you're looking for a side hustle. You've got a business, you're trying to figure out how to improve your business. Well, the school of thought that I subscribe to is there's some fundamental pieces to a successful business. What makes a business successful? What makes a business not successful? There's some universal laws, whether you are an HVAC company or you're a restaurant or you're a healthcare company. You need to identify a problem that somebody has that they don't have a solution for. I know that this sounds basic, but it's not. Lots of people, very smart, well-intentioned people, have put a huge amount of work and a huge amount of equity into starting something that really wasn't a problem to begin with. And that can be devastating. And so it's really important, if you're thinking about starting a business or you have a business, it's really important that you ask yourself and you do some research on, is there a problem that somebody has that they don't actually want this problem? And is there a solution that they want that they don't have to the problem? If the answer is yes, you may have something that you can provide. Now, it doesn't mean you've got the solution, but there needs to be an identifying problem. That's step one. Any contributions on this, Karl?
The first comment I would make, and it sounds so basic, and that is, so many people that have a business or say they have a business don't treat it like a business.
Right.
You need to have the mindset that it is a business. It's not a hobby. If you go in there, you're going to set yourself up for failure if you don't treat it from day one like a business. Set it up, do all the record keeping, the bookkeeping, and everything. It's a business. It's not a hobby.
Right.
As to what you were saying, Shaq's spot on. There's a saying in the community, USP, unique sales proposition.
Yeah.
You've got to have something that people want, that you're serving them a need that's unique. Because if you're just like everybody else, you sell t-shirts. And if everybody else sells t-shirts and you don't have something that stands you apart from the rest, the only differentiator is price.
Yep.
So you've got to have something that makes them want to come, that you offer them, and they go, Matt solves that problem for me. Whatever that is, whether it's customer service, price, the quality of your product, the uniqueness of it, those kind of things. So if you don't do that, the challenges are going to be that much harder to overcome.
Yep.
Because you're just fighting in the big crowd of everybody, and if they find you, it's just luck of the draw.
Yep. That's right. And I like when I'm approached by a business to work with them, I don't work with commodity businesses. There's nothing wrong with commodities. And what a commodity means is that it basically, crudely, you're just there to sort of suck oxygen out of the room. You're there to capture some of the market space and just kind of see how much you can capture. So like an example of a commodity would be, let's just say a pizza shop. You're just pizza, Domino's, right? Some of these things. It's all about position the place on the right corner where there's 5,000 people that walk by at lunchtime. And just statistically, you're going to get 5% of the people that walk by. And that's it. And you do that, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I find it boring, and I don't like working with those businesses. I like to work with businesses that are a service that is a little bit more preeminent, that's a little more specialized. It's only because that's my experience of creating those kinds of businesses. I've had a couple of different companies that I've built, and certainly LiftAffect in the healthcare space is very specific. I mean, Matt McNeil Associates, very specific. So that's what I choose to do. So what we're talking about is like, figure out who is your customer. That's the right way. What is the market segmentation? You got to build an end user profile. You need to calculate, the size of your market. Find a profile of the persona of of the people in the market, identifying who your customer is or your client. And there's a kind of a rule is commodities have customers and preeminent businesses have clients. It's a difference. There's a big difference.
They're saying create the avatar. What is the ideal
that's right,
individual or person that wants what you're offering or that you're trying to sell to?
Right.
And build that, and then start working your way backwards. Like you say, if the market's too small, it better be a very high end product that you're offering. Otherwise, you're just not going to have enough people to have a viable market.
So once you got that, let's say you figure out that's a real thing, and you kind of know who you know that there's a problem that somebody has that they don't want, and you know that there's a solution that they want that they don't have, and you've identified that you've got the solution. Then you've got to figure out, okay, what can I do for this person? What can I do for my client? So you got to create a full life cycle use case, right? What does it look like from start to end of them using my product or my service? Create some high level product specification, quantify the value of the proposition. So now we're starting to look even about like, what is this worth? And let's talk about price for a second, because this is a key thing. Racing around trying to compete on pricing, it's a reality. But I'll tell you this, and I don't care what industry you work in, people shop the value that you provide them, period, hands down. And if they are only focused on price, it is because either A, you don't bring any value to them, B, you have value, but you have not communicated it properly, or C, there's just no perceived value. It might be there, but it's not perceived, which kind of relates to number two. You haven't, but there's a little slight differences. So people shop value. They don't shop price. They only shop price is because the value is not there, or it's not understood. And so you've got to really make sure. That's why I think it's important to figure out that what you're bringing is of high value. The higher the value it is, the more you can charge for it. Some realtors charge a lot more than others, and say, well, how is it how can they demand that price and the other one can't? Because it's the value that's perceived that realtor brings. So that's a really important distinction. So you're not just like racing around competing on price. A guy came to my house the other day trying to, like knocked on my door, says no solicitors. I always laugh. I'm like, thanks for following. Thanks for following the sign here. But he wanted to paint the house. I have a paint, and I said, so what makes you different than all of these like cards that get put on my door every day? It's like a painter or a landscaper. Why should I choose you over this? And I had another one sitting on the porch. I said, but what makes you different from this? And I looked at the flyers, and it was the same formula, the same shit on there. And it's like, so how would I know who to go with? And he couldn't give me a compelling reason why I should choose him over his competitor, other than, we take credit cards. Well, yeah, that's kind of baseline. I would expect that you would take a credit card. That's not a value to me. That's a baseline. I mean, it's valuable, right? I don't have to pay cash, but I would pay cash if it was something really compelling about what you could bring. And so, I started to like coach this guy a little bit about, well, here's something that you could do that would set yourself apart. And I said, what's the number one thing that problem that your customers have? And I didn't say clients, because he's really just a commodity at this point. Like, what is the biggest problem people have when they're considering a house painter? What do you think he said, Karl? I mean, you reflect on it. What's the number one issue people have with house painters?
The quality of the work.
The quality sucks.
Yep.
The quality sucks. What else? What's another problem?
I mean, obviously price is always an issue with them.
No, that's only because the value's not there.
True,
but what's the problem? If they leave a frickin' mess, it's a they don't clean up their crap. They're there at the odd times. They're not there at consistent times. There's any kind of contractor you've ever dealt with. This is a problem. This is a huge problem. And so it's like, well, why don't you communicate that you leave no messes? You're the cleanest painter in the industry in Colorado. You will be there specifically at these times. You will leave at these times. You have a risk reversal, which is a quality guarantee, right? We're not done until you're happy. I mean, if you had communicated those things with me, I would be a little bit more compelled to say, yeah, maybe I'm interested because I actually do need some painting done inside, you know? But if you don't communicate that, like, because he hasn't identified the pain that I, as the consumer, have. So when you're thinking about a business, there's got to be a pain point. You have to identify where is the pain. Even if you're selling a piece of pizza, what's the pain? I'm hungry. I want good pizza, or I want cheap pizza, or whatever it is. You've got to figure out what the pain point is of your prospect. Prospect means somebody that could buy from you, but has not yet bought from you. So this guy's trying to do lead generation. He's trying to get leads that he can nurture into a prospect, right? That could then become a client or a customer. So that's lead generation. But the hardest part, and so there's 5 fundamentals of business. We get into this. Karl knows this. Here's the 5 fundamentals of business. You have to generate a lead. You have to be able to convert that lead into a client or a paying customer or client. So that's called a conversion. You want to increase the total number of transactions that you have, meaning that they buy from you. We call that lifetime value, right? Maybe it's once, maybe it's 100 times, but it's good to know what is the maximum number of times somebody can buy from me. You've got to have a proper upfront offer in terms of your pricing strategy. So you have to be priced in a way that is aligned with the value that you have communicated. That's got to be aligned. And then you need to know some very fundamentals of being able to be profitable. Fundamental stuff, business profitability strategies and tactics of accounts receivable, accounts payable, and taxes, and that's kind of things. But if you work on those things, but here's what people do when they want to start, and I've seen pilots do this, right? They got a business idea, and you know what they spend all their time on? Their website. It's like, is Karl, one of our good friends, Karl Bryan, he's a legend of a business coach. That's called sexy delusional, right? Oh, I've got to get Facebook ads. I've got to get marketing. I got to have a good flyer. I got to have a good website. I've got to have a good, that's fine, but that's not going to move the needle. And when I work with business clients, I work with basically $50 million or less. Anything over $50 million is a different kind of business coaching. I like the $50 million or less, and really 50 employees or less are the businesses I like. I do have some that have more than that, but the problem with that is once you're over 50 employees, you're basically in the business of human resources and not anything else, period. But the point is a website, a flyer, an ad is great, but that's not the foundation. And it's just like everything we've talked about on this podcast is the fundamentals gets the job done every time. But we want to get really creative, and we want to get advanced and cute with things beyond the fundamentals. And that is just sexy delusional. You're buying off into the carrot that if I just have a great business card, that's gonna get me the job. I don't have a business card. I haven't had a business card in years. I know people ask for me for business cards. I don't have one. So you can find me. You can find me. I focus on the business. And so any business I work with, I tell them, we are going to be cleaning toilets. I clean toilets for a living when it comes to business coaching. I do the stinking fundamentals, which is like if you've got a restaurant or you got a hotel, you can have the nicest business cards on your kiosk, but if the rooms are disgusting and the toilets are dirty and the showers don't work, you're not going to have a hotel for very long. And it's the fundamentals that get the job done. So it is leads, that's easy to get. How to convert a lead, not a problem. How to increase the number of transactions with, that's different services that you offer. Pricing, there's lots of ways to have different pricing strategies. You can bundle things, you can upsell, you can cross-sell, you can downsell, and fundamentals of accelerating your profit. And there's I can't even begin to get into some of that, but that is the fundamentals of building a business. But start with what's the problem that somebody has, and what is the solution that they want that they don't have. And you'd be surprised, that will eliminate 95% of the businesses that you decide to come up with, because you're like, it's not really a problem, or it's just like, it's a problem, but my solution is no better than anybody else's solution, So that's my thoughts on it. What's your thoughts?
No, I think you said just about everything I said or would have said. It's those are very important, because most people don't think about it in that perspective. They think they've got a great idea and they start putting it all together and haven't done the research or the foundational looking at what will make the business work and attractive to the prospective client that they're trying to reach to.
Yep.
Once they do those things, their opportunities to be a profitable or have a successful business skyrocket.
Yes,
I wanted to throw. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's those are the 5 like high level fundamentals: leads, conversions, lifetime value, proper upfront pricing strategy, and then profits, fundamentals of profit. Then once you've got that, then you can get into a little bit more like nitty gritty, like who is your customer? What can you do for your customer? How does your customer acquire your product? How do you make money off your product? That's key too. You got to be able to make money. How do you design and build your product? And then how do you scale your business? And that's like, there's like 24 different things within that. That's why my engagements are like 1 to 3 years, often longer, because it takes that long to continuously, the continuous process of improvement. But you got to start with those fundamentals, and you'd be surprised. I'll get in there, and these are businesses that are making money, and they have not thought through those 5 fundamentals. They've kind of gotten lucky, but what got you to here isn't going to get you to there. And so at some point you have to do this work, or you're going to be really limited with what you can do, or it might not be sustainable. It might have just been like, the stars kind of aligned, but easy come, easy go.
What I was going to say is in particular towards you, not towards other people's businesses, is that you as a coach don't do the work. You actually provide the guidance and the insight and the direction, but it's up to your client to do it. And there's a saying that you've said to me multiple times, you can't want it more than they do. Nope. If they're not willing to do that, then all you wanting it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, so, it's true. And I will terminate it. I just terminated a contract last week with a client, because it's like, one is, not showing up for meetings, showing up late. It's like that. We're done, because look, this is somebody that's paying me every month, no questions asked, but it's not about the money. It's about helping, and and if you can't want to help yourself, well, then I'm starting to want this more than you. And that's an unequal exchange, and it's not my business, it's your business. And, I will never want it more than you. Same with the therapy, same with anything else. You've got to want this. And if you don't have, if you can't even show up for your own work, why the hell am I showing up? And so we're still friends, but it was like, listen, we're going to cancel this, because this isn't working out. You've got and look, and if I tell you what to do, at the end of the day, it's your business. You get to do what you want. But if you're not taking my advice and keep screwing things up, why are you paying? Like, what do you need me for? You need me to tell you what to do in this, so you can say, no, I'm going to do it this way, and then it doesn't work. I mean, at some point, it's like, I'm not here to do the work for you. I'm here to tell you what you can do that will work. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, right? But it's not a perfect science, but there is some science to this. We're not putting a man on the moon. I mean, there are some very, precise tactics that are aligned with long-term strategic, principles that work to build companies and build businesses, because I've done it. And so, But at the end of the day, it's up to them, and it's their choice. What they can do, what they want. It's a collaborative process. I'm not, I'm a strategic advisor. That's what I do.
Well, I am pretty sure that after this podcast is heard by all of our listeners, that we're going to get a lot of questions and comments on this, because you touched on so many different things. Like,
yeah,
I think
really
we could
broad.
have done a whole series on just this one issue. But I think we need to wrap it up for the day. Any last parting thoughts?
I would say, if you're not a business owner, I'm just got business on the head right now. I think that you still are a business owner, even if you're an employee at a company or you work as a pilot. Or I think you still kind of represent your own little business. I mean, I think that there's a way to apply some of these things to whether you're working on special projects or even the current role that you have. I think that there's some principles that business is life. Everything is business. Everything is related to this. And so I think it may not speak to you because you're not an entrepreneur. You don't want to own your own business, but I still think there's some value that you could probably gain by learning some of these principles and just applying them in areas of your life that you'd be surprised where you can apply them. That's the one thing I want to add. The two is like, choose a like the productivity planner, right? If you just do one thing a day, one thing, I know there's a ton, but one thing, you will find geometric growth and improvement by doing that. But what happens is you'll feel better. But we got everything on the plate and we just go into shutdown mode because we've exceeded channel capacity. This is just
analysis
science.
Paralysis. You're just overwhelmed.
So just choose one thing. And if you're in systems school or you're at the airlines and you're overwhelmed with something, like if you're in the electrical system, just say, okay, today I'm going to learn one thing about one principle or property or fundamental of how this works. Just one thing. Or the FMS. I'm just going to learn. I see this all the time. I'm trying to learn how to program the FMS. It's a new thing. It can trip people up. I'm like, just start with I'm going to learn how to initialize, or I'm going to learn how to swap databases, or I'm going to learn one, and you can build on that. But if you're like, I got to know how to use the FMS, it's like a fool's run. You're just going to get overwhelmed and try to think everything is important. You got to start with something. So start with one thing and build from there.
Well, that wraps it up for today. I will throw a little bit of a teaser out that in the coming weeks and months, we've got some great things in store for this podcast. So stay tuned for all of that. More to come. Keep the comments, questions, ideas coming towards us. It's podcast@liftaffect.com. Also, share this with everybody. Please give us a like. We just hope to see you and keep you coming back. Once again, thanks for being here today, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Lift Effect podcast. If you want to dive deeper into this episode and every episode, go to our website, liftaffect.com/podcast. If you're enjoying the show, we would love it if you'd follow us on Spotify and rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate your support. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, all with the ID Matthew McNeil. This show is brought to you by Lift Effect, a clinical mental health and consulting company that assists air carriers, corporate flight departments, pilot unions, and commercial pilots by providing comprehensive psychotherapy and mental skills coaching services to pilots with mental health and mental performance-related issues. Visit liftaffect.com, that's liftaffect.com, to book your free consultation. And finally, this podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practice of counseling, psychotherapy, medicine, or any other healthcare service, including the giving of medical advice. No therapeutic or provider-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and any materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional psychological advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining advice for any psychological or medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Lift Effect podcast.